All right. So on Saturday and today, we did a little bit of unit testing. And we talked about using specifically the unit test library in Python. And we've been talking about classes, and some of this from a syntactical perspective should look relatively familiar for you, such as like having class names being capitalized. When we actually define a class method, we have the self keyword. Did Chad talk about what this part of the code is on Saturday at all? Or no? Yes, no, kind of, don't remember.
It's
I think you touched on it a little bit.
Okay. Did somebody else say something?
Yeah, I was just saying it shows where the class is inheriting from.
Okay. And when you, yeah, exactly. And that's what we're gonna talk about today is inheritance. And has anybody heard of inheritance in Python classes? Or if you have, feel free to kind of let what your definition of inheritance is.
I think what I've kind of read up on it so far is you have classes, and we always want to avoid rewriting code that's already been written. So if you have a class for employee and then a class for say an administrator, they might have a lot of the same attributes, and so you can inherit the methods in a template from one class into another. So again, so you're not rewriting, you can reuse code even more.
Yep, exactly. And that's exactly what we're going to go over today is that example, like using employees and stuff. So yep, it's where we don't want it's we've already written code and we want to use that code somewhere else. So if there's a lot of if you find yourself, if you've ever heard of dry programming, don't repeat yourself. So if you find yourself rewriting the same class that has the same attributes, same methods over and over again, you might want to break that out into a parent class. So with that, let's go ahead and go ahead and do some inheritance with regard to object-oriented programming and classes. So say, I think we kind of touched on this last week, where we created a class, like a developer class or like an engineer class. So say again, we're starting a company and this organization is growing and growing, and we have a bunch of different roles within this organization. This new tech company, we have, software engineers, product managers, QA engineers, accountants, scrum masters, finance people, financial analysts, treasury analysts, treasurers, just product man. I think I already said that, but like we have all these different titles and different titles. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to create a couple of classes. So I'm going to create a software engineer .py. I'm going to create, what else should I create? Product manager .py. I'll create a treasury analyst or .py. So I'm just going to actually let's open these up. Where we at? All right. I guess we'll just use two of these for right now. So I've got a product manager and a software engineer. So as a new software engineer, when a new software engineer joins, we create a new software engineer class, like employee. So I'm going to create class software engineer. And I'm going to create the dunder def init. It takes in the self. Let's say we have a first name, last name. We can have like employee ID. And what else should we have? Salary maybe. Yeah. Or title or certifications or something like that. Say title. All right. So let's actually come over here just so it's a little bit easier. So I'm going to create a self dot some instance variables, self dot first name equals first name. And I'm going to bring these down to create the other instance variables. So employee ID. Oh. And I'll just say title. And the software engineer, let's say def, tell me about yourself. This is just an instance method that's just, I can say just return, let's make it an F string. My name is self.first name. Self.last name. And I'm a software engineer. I guess I could just do self.title. Self.title. What else should I say? I think that's good. And yeah. And I make, yeah, disregard. I'll just say this is good enough. So I've got this software engineer. I've got this that takes in the first name, last name, employee ID, and the title. And the title could be software engineer. There's multiple different types of software engineers as far as like ranking. I can be like an associate software engineer, a software engineer. You can be a software engineer 2, software engineer 3, senior software engineer 2, principal software engineer, type like tech lead or yeah, lead, lead software engineer. There's a bunch of different titles within the software engineer field. So I can create like a new engineer, and I can create a new instance of this software engineer. I say Tom, create employee ID. It could just be like some arbitrary number, and title, I'll just say software engineer 2. So if I want to if I want to have this new software engineer tell me about themselves, I can say, tell me about yourself. And I can print that out. And now I can actually run that. So Python software engineer says, my name is Tom Preet. I'm a software engineer 2. And I'll actually say, you can also do like email, but I'll also add salary in here. I'm trying to think. Languages, known languages. And languages, or just main language, I guess, like main software engineering language. So I'm a software engineer, and my primary coding language is self dot language. So if I did that again, I just say, I'll say mine is JavaScript. Do that. Clear, run that again. My name is Tom Preet. I'm a software engineer and my primary coding language is JavaScript. And all right, that's all great. But say, so we hired a software engineer. Now we need to hire a product manager. And I can do the same thing over here. So class product manager and def dunder init. So you're creating this program that we need to create our product manager class, last name, employee ID, title. And maybe this time this person has like certifications, like maybe they're a Scrum Master, maybe they have some type of certification. So I can do the same thing, self dot first name, and come down here. Last name, employee ID, title, certification.
I apologize ahead of time because I think
Okay.
you've covered this before, but to edit those two at the same time, I got a couple of shortcuts, but how are you doing that one?
Yep. So here, I like for first name, I highlight whatever value I want to change. So I double click on it and then I do Command D and it highlights every instance of that. So now I see how it's got 3 cursors, and now I can highlight them again and just like edit all in place.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Yep. Yeah, good question. All right. So, and this product manager also has a class, or I'm sorry, instance method called tell me about yourself. But notice this tell me about yourself is very specific to being a software engineer, because it says like, and my primary coding language is whatever, whatever language it is. Here, I can return something completely different. My name is self dot first name, and I'm self dot title. Yeah, I hold self dot certification. Something like that. All right. So if I wanted to create a new product manager, I can create a new instance of a product manager and say, John, does anybody want to be a product manager in here at some point?
Sign me up.
Was that Stefan? Was it Steven or Stefan?
Steven.
Steven. I don't know why I think Stefan. Stefan. What was it? Employee ID, just some random numbers. Product manager. Do you know what certifications you might need?
Scrum Master. I'm not sure that's the exact title.
Yeah, I'll just say Scrum. Scrum Master cert. Yeah. All right, that's good. And so now this new product manager, dot tell me about yourself. If I run that file, Python product manager. So hi, my name is Steven. I'm a product manager. I hold a Scrum Master certification. So we've got these 2 different classes that are employees for this new company we're starting. But notice we've kind of repeated some code here. So what are some what's some pieces of code that we can extract out of here? That's like,
First name, last name, employee, and title are all duplicated.
okay, so we got first name, last name, employee ID, title. That's duplicated. What else is also duplicated? What
Tell
are
me
some-
about
Tell
yourself.
me about
Well, no, because it's a little different, but
It's a little bit different, but we can extract it if we want, or we can do something with that. So again, we don't want to repeat ourselves, so we can extract the code that we're going to be reusing a lot and put it into a parent class. And it's a parent class. So let's actually just go ahead and do that. So I'm down here. I list everything out. So I've got my software engineer class, my product manager class. I'm going to create like a generic employee class. So I'm going to touch employee.py. I'm going to code employee like so. And in here, let's actually bring that over to this employee and bring that software product manager over here. So I'm going to create a class called employee and def dunder init. And employees, the only thing an employee actually needs to create, or the only thing we need to create an employee class, let's just say we just need first name, last name, employee ID, and title. So I'm going to come over here and create employee. So we don't need language. There we go. I don't even necessarily know if we need title. That's just like an architect. That's a design decision we can make. But first name, last name, employee ID, and title. Let's also add some methods here to the employee class. Tell me about yourself. And this one is just says return f string. Hi, my name is self dot first name self dot last name, and I'm a self dot title. All right, so we created this employee class, this parent class, and when we talk about when you think about inheriting things, what's like something when you think about the word inheriting, etc.
import.
Import,
Are we gonna import that function into that one?
we will, yeah. But before we actually import it in, when we just talk about inheritance and just inheriting, the word inheriting, what do we think about? Like, what are some things
They related.
they're related? So, like,
You're giving to.
Same characteristics.
yep. So you're
propagates
giving to,
down.
populates down. Great, yeah. So when you think about inheritance or inheriting, I think about like, all right, I've got a mom and dad. And I've inherited certain traits from them. My dad's Italian, my mom's Irish. I just happen to inherit my mom's, pale skin and freckles and whatever. I inherited my dad's hair, so I inherited specific traits from my parents. So it's stuff that's passed down. And in here, we have an employee parent class that have specific traits, first name, last name, employee ID, title, that we want to pass down to these more specific software engineer, product manager, employee types. I want to say employee types. I'll say like a software engineer is an employee. It's just a more specific type of employee. So Latasha is right. We need to import. So we need to import the employee class from the employee file. So from the employee file, import the employee class. And in order for the software engineer class to inherit the specific attributes from the employee class, such as first name, last name. We need to, it's almost like we're passing it in as an argument, but we're inheriting the software engineer class is inheriting attributes from the employee class. So that's how that syntax works, but we're still not done yet because we're still repeating a lot of code. So, any questions about the syntax here? All right. All right. So now when we create an employee, or I'm sorry, a software engineer, we still have to pass in the first name, last name, employee ID, title, and language. But now we've inherited the first name, last name, employee ID, and title from the employee class. So we almost want to pass through these attributes, first name, last name, employee ID, title, to the employee class. And we can do that by calling the employee class dot, I think it's, what is it? Can it do dot dunder init? So we're accessing the employee class. We're calling the dunder init method. And let me see if I got the syntax right. Then we do, first name, last name, employee ID. Employee ID and title. Let's see if this works. We might have to mess around with it a little bit. So we're inheriting the first name, last name, employee ID from title, and now we're creating instance methods, or I'm sorry, instance variables through the employee class. So I'm going to come down here and I'm going to Python software engineer. All right, so I got one. What did I do? So dunder init. Let's see if I need that. There we go. So I needed to pass in the self keyword as well to when I'm essentially calling, I'm passing the first name, last name, employee ID, and title into the employee's dunder init method.
Got a quick question on this.
Yep.
So I'm just kind of following along in the app user
Okay.
thing we have. So when you use like tab complete, when I start doing the def double under init, it autofills with a super dot and then another dunder in it with the same parameters. Is there a preference to using, I've got the page pulled up about what that is now, but is there a preference between that versus using the employee dot init or versus super dot init?
Yep, there will be, and I'll let you know in a second. So here we're inheriting from the employee class and we're typing in employee again here. So this employee is looking at, it's saying, hey, you're inheriting from, or the software engineer is inheriting the employee attributes. And right here, we're invoking the dunder init from the employee. But at some point in the future, our code base gets really huge. And we want to, if we ever wanted to change the name of this class employee, such as like something, I'm just going to name it something else. And then I'd have to something else. Let's see if this works. Still works, but it's not ideal because we have to go ahead and change this value to something else. in every instance that this something else or this employee class inherits wherever it's being called. That's what the super is for. So if we do super, invoke it, the super automatically looks and says, what class, what other classes does software engineer inherit from? So that's what that super is. And when we use super and invoke it, it automatically, and if we do that, then we don't need that self keyword. So super automatically looks at, hey, what parent class does software engineer belong to? All right, it belongs to the employee. So the super automatically calls the employee class. So if I run that again, everything still works. So benefits to using super over employee is that if we were ever to change the employee, we would have to change it every instance of wherever employee is called. So maybe the parent class has, 20 different children, because maybe there's 20 different types of employees, software engineers, product managers, treasury analysts, financial analysts, like copywriter, etc. And all employee would have to exist every instance in there, or would have to change that many times. So super just automatically defaults to look at whatever the parent class is of software engineer.
Okay,
Would there be
thanks.
any point where you don't want to use that super?
Nope. I've not that I've seen. So I can do the same thing here. So the product manager inherits from the employee class. I can get rid of all this and just call super dot dunder init, first name, last name, employee ID, title. Now if I to call that product manager, there we go. So just think of a parent class or inheritance as a class inheriting attributes such as instance variables, like we are here. We're inheriting first name, last name, employee ID, title. We're inheriting all those instance variables down into the product manager as well. But we can also inherit instance methods as well. So maybe the employee class has just a, let's see, dunder string method that just returns first name, self dot first name, self dot last name, and self dot employee ID or something like that. If I wanted to print out this software engineer, so if I were to just print new software engineer or new engineer, I guess that class is called, or that instance method is called, or instance, this variable, whatever, this individual variable, I can call that. And see how it says Tom Preet followed by my ID number. So the software engineer here inherits this dunder string method that from the employee class. So when I just print just whatever this object is, because if I didn't have that, like so, and I would do that, it would have this software engineer, but this dunder string method makes it kind of look pretty when I print that out. Like so. But maybe I want to override, well, actually, let's actually create another one. So I can say def, say hello, Whoop. And this just returns hello. That's all it does. This say hello just returns hello. This new engineer, since this software engineer class inherits from all the attributes, instance methods, etc., from the employee class, it also inherits the say hello instance method. So I can say hello on this new engineer instance. And it says hello. But maybe I can also do the same thing for the product manager. So I can say print new product manager. Whoop. Say hello. And now, or even with the product manager, also inherits the say hello instance method. But say the product manager is a little more, I don't know, outgoing. I can overwrite my employees say hello at instance method. So say hello. And maybe the product manager is a little more friendly and they just return hi. How are you? Something like that. So I overwrote my parents say hello instance method with my own instance method. So when I say Python product manager, it says, hi, how are you? Versus my software engineer still will just say hello. What questions do you have about inheritance and inheriting from parent classes?
Can one class inherit from two parent classes?
Yes, it can. So maybe there's another class, employee, I don't know, another class, and maybe there's an attribute like, I don't know, like a mother, father, or parents. Maybe you have multiple parents. You have a stepfather, stepmother, or whatever, and you have multiple parents. And for whatever reason, you inherit certain attributes. It doesn't have to be something physical. It can be like a specific mannerism or a way of saying something. So you can inherit multiple classes. Like here's another class, third class or third parent class, etc.
I have a question also.
Yep.
You didn't say anything as far as the class variables. Are those inherited also?
Yes. So all attributes are inherited. So even
Okay.
class variables are inherited.
Gotcha.
But that's a good question. So yeah, you can have multiple. So here, let's see. Num of employees equals 0. And in here, if I just did like employee dot num of employees plus equals 1. Before I do that, before I talk about the class variables, you can inherit from multiple parent classes. So you just have to pass in additional parent classes. And the hierarchy goes, so say employee, another class, and third parent class all have the same, one of the same attributes or all the same instance methods, but they say something a little bit different. The very first one, well, hold on, I don't want to, the very first employee class, the first person, is the most dominant parent. So this takes precedence over this another class, and another class takes precedence over third parent class. There's like a hierarchy in how things are passed down. But this isn't that common, but just know that that exists. When it comes to class variables, so employee has number of employees. Every time I create an employee, I increase the number of employees. And so if I wanted to create an employee, I can say print new engineer dot num of employees. If I ran that, you can see I inherited number of employees from my parent class. All right, what questions do you have about inheritance?
When you're inheriting from multiple parents in the dunder and knit, did the super cover all the parents, or would you have to have separate ones?
That is a good question. I don't know of a situation where you'd have to inherit from multiple init instance variables. But yeah, that is a good, I don't know. Does anybody know the answer to that? I'll look it up and let y'all know. But yeah, I've never seen that. I've never seen it like from a syntactical perspective how that's done. So it's either not very common. Yeah, I doubt it's very common.
So it usually goes from one to another, basically. So say for instance, we use an employee, another and another. So normally the syntax would be employee might, like the last another might employee from the other one. Does it usually go like that? So you have separate pages instead of importing everything onto one sheet? Am I making myself clear?
So yeah, what was the question?
So basically, say I have 3 different
parent classes.
parent classes. So you say that normally it's not important. You don't import all 3 of them to one page, correct?
No,
So
you can.
You can.
Yeah. So what I think I was saying was more often than not, a class usually doesn't inherit from multiple parents. Typically.
Right. And that's what I was saying. So basically one just builds off another and then the last one just wind up with everything.
No, I don't want to say that, but yeah, I don't want to say that they all build off of one another. That just means, but yeah, usually there is a base class, and then there could be multiple grandparents, great grandparents. You can see that occasionally as well.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. What other questions do you have about inheritance? So just remember that the super method automatically looks at the parent class. So you can pass in these instance variables through to the parent class. If I were to pass in like language to the parent class, it would throw an error. So it's like super init, first name, last name, language. The dunder init takes 5 positional arguments, but 6 were given. So just be aware of that.
Hey, Tom.
Yep.
So whenever you did num of employees as the class variable, and then software engineer went to go populate it, how come it doesn't populate 2 because product manager is also created?
Because I didn't actually run this file. So if I were to I'd have to create like a runner file where both of these were created in a single, when I execute this program. But right now I'm not executing both of these in the same program. They're separate.
Thanks.
It's a good question.